Hey, what's going on YouTube? This is Broman Clash, and tonight I actually want to do a bit of an analysis video describing a movie series that I watched since I was young. And some of y'all are going to laugh, but truth be told, I actually want to talk about the movie series Shrek. Yes, Shrek. Out of all movies, I want to talk about Shrek. The reason why I want to talk about Shrek is because it breaks the to me it kind of breaks the boundaries on stereotypical female, stereotypical fairy tale tropes, such as the damsel in distress, the handsome prince, all that other crap. And the reason why I like this series is because it has a bit of a flair of going against reality and expectations. Like realistically, we're speaking on like fears of growing up, fears of actually understanding people, fears of opening up to people, acceptance, and overall just being yourself. While on the other hand, you have expectations, the fairy tale expectation of the handsome prince, saving the damsel in distress, the king and the queen seeing their daughter for like the very first time as human. A bit of a spoiler alert for those who haven't watched what 13 or 14-year old, 13 or 12-year-old movie, and then overall keeping like this whole expectations of actually being young or having like your bit of your flair and your prime again. But the thing that I want to talk about with Shrek is the fact that it actually goes against, like I mentioned before, goes against the stereotypical fairy tale tropes. And the reason why that's important is because you got to think about it. Fairy tale tropes tend to stick with people ever since they're young, right into adulthood. But the thing about fairy tale expectations is the fact that it's more. That's what it is. It's just a fairy tale. It's realistic. It's just an expectation, and expectations sometimes can be met, and majority of the time, not gonna be met. But Shrek deals with it in a more realistic tone, as opposed to just happening at an instant. Because it's funny because in one of the movies, in one of the particular scenes, the king or Fiona's dad mentioned that it's not my fault that the ogre got to him first. Prince Charming didn't get there on time. That's the funny thing. The king even said it right then and there. It's not my fault that the ogre got to my daughter first. Prince Charming was busy doing whatever the fuck he was doing, trying to keep up this air of expectations. And to talk about this whole motif of expectations versus reality in Shrek, let's look at the first movie. The first movie, you see like the ogre, he's stereotypically shown to be just angry, ornery, cantankerous, grouchy, just overall just an unpleasant force to be with, as said by Donkey in the second movie. But then over time, you actually gradually see his more humane side and how the way, even though he's a monster on the outside, but on the inside, he has much more of a human heart. And then to actually, even though he was doing it for personal gain, what shows off like a bit of a selfish side, which typically Shrek has been known to be shown as. But the thing is, Shrek is kind of funny because Shrek is actually more of like a character, a characteristic trait that you see sometimes in most owners, because they've been taught to fend for themselves. They've been taught that the world is mean. They've been taught the reason why I can identify with Shrek the most is because I can understand what it's like to be isolated from other people because you're just different. And it goes right with this quote and how the way it hits the boundaries between reality and expectations. Because he said they judge me before they even know me. Hence why I'm better off alone. He lived by that motto. You can even see it in his character and how the way he opened up to Donkey and all that other crap. Now, sorry to say crap, I meant to say stuff. But the reason why that's important to note in Shrek is because in Shrek, that's how life really is. You don't know who's going to be there for you. It may not be Prince Charming, it may just be ordinary Joe. And ordinary Joe has an extraordinary heart. And some of you may say that's cheesy, that's corny, Clash. Why would you say something like that? Because it's true. Majority of the time, corny, overused cliches reveal a truth. And it's kind of funny because people nowadays really live in a world of expectations. And Shrek, like, hits this on the nail even back in 2000. And you never even thought about it, like, as a child, as a kid, you never even thought about it. But then once you really look at it, especially when you look at, like I mentioned about the character of Shrek, originally he starts out as like this very ornery, basically what Donkey describes as ornery, cantankerous, mean old salty, and just overall just an unpleasant force. Then you gradually see him opening up, and he even described himself as an onion. And Donkey said, what ogres stink?" When he said, "Okay, let's see, ogres are like onions." Donkey just retorted and said, "What, because they stink?" He said, "Yes, no." "Oh, they make you cry?" "No." Because if you saw Shrek's reaction towards how Donkey assumed that, ogres make children cry, ogres make people cry because they're stereotypically they have been shown to be, very mean, very salty, very monstrous. That's the thing. And Shrek breaks that by showing that, hey, even sometimes when you see people who have like very out there features, if you really sit down and talk with them, you'll realize that you can relate to them sometimes. And sometimes people who have normal features or even out of this world features, what I mean, like beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Shrek hits that on the nail when the whole layer with the onion scene. He said, "Look, layers. Onions have layers. Ogres have layers. Onions have layers. You get it? We both have layers." And then Donkey says, "Oh, so ogres have layers, huh?" Not everybody likes onions. Cake! Yeah, that's right, cake. Everybody loves cake. Ogres are like cakes. I don't care what everyone likes. Remember that line. I don't care what everyone likes. That's a bit of a reality slash expectation because it goes hand in hand. And he says ogres are not like cakes. And then you gotta ask yourself, what does he mean by that? And why is that line kind of sticks out to you? Like, really, just think about it. Because what do you do with a cake? You bake it up, you doll it up. That's what you do. An onion, that's what you get. It's just layers upon layers upon layers. Of course, it's going to make you cry. Of course, it's going to stink. But that's what it is. It's just an onion. A cake you just cover up. You make it look to your expectations, the way you dreamt it would look. It's not meant to be just a plain patch of just batter fluffed up. That's just it. It's a process to make the cake look good. That to me, that one particular scene hit like, even though it was meant to be like a humorous take on things, on how the way fairy tales typically portray ogres as like, very ornery characters. But that one scene showed off something very funny because it showed off that like, hey, this is the difference between like an onion person and a cake person, because an onion person, that's what you literally get. At their core, they grow up from the ground up. While a cake, you mix in ingredients, you fluff it up, it takes time to make. but yet at the same time you cover it up just to make it look good. You know what I'm trying to say, right? A cake is like the expectation. The onion is just the reality. If you peel out the onion, you see who they truly are. If you just cut up a cake, that's just it. You cut up expectations. Then we move on forward to the movie where Donkey meets Dragon. Now, this scene, Eddie Murphy, he's a very good actor, voice actor, so I give him my props. But when you saw the scene with Dragon and Donkey, that scene was actually kind of funny because Donkey starts off like, he's like, my, what large teeth you have. Like something out of the Red Riding Hood, with the werewolf and all that stuff. But then he goes over and, just completely smooth talker. He said, no, what I mean is like bright sparkling teeth. Don't you know you have some good teeth right there? Yeah, I say you have some good, lovely smile. He said, and don't you know that your breath has a hint of minty freshness? Donkey to a great degree represents, a person trying to cope with reality. As a, coping through reality by looking at it through a positive lens, which is a stark contrast to Shrek looking at life or expectations or thus reality to a degree at a relatively negative lens. And then, let me just point that out a bit. Then, Donkey goes out and just completely, to a degree, serenades her and says, oh, you're a female dragon. Of course you are, girl dragon. You just rip with feminine beauty, He said, what's the matter with you? You got something in your eye? Then she blows smoke in his face. It was so funny because that's how some people cope with reality. Like, dragon, to a degree, that's what dragon is. Dragon is like a reality kept in a castle or in a keep, meant not to be released. That's my take on dragon. And then when Donkey dealt with reality or dragon in such a way that it actually made reality look more positive than negative. Uh, Sometimes I really do wonder why those two have kids, to out of this world species. But then, sorry about that. But going back to talking about Donkey dealing with reality, or AKA the dragon. That's what I call it, dragon. And it was funny because when they were alone in the keep, that's like somebody coping with the reality and looking at reality instead of just like running away from it or killing it as they stereotypically do in fairy tales, with dragons and, overall just that. That was the funny thing. But when Donkey was just like, just talking with the dragon and all that other crap, and he said, hey, that was up. And when she did this, he would say, hey, that was unwanted physical contact, and she was blowing on some refire on some candles and all that stuff. Remember, the dragon is a dragon nonetheless, so she can breathe fire. And he was like, hey, what are you doing? And it was so funny because it made me laugh because this was literally a donkey trying to talk with a dragon and or coping with reality. And then to make matters even more complex is when Shrek came crashing down, saving not only both saving both Donkey and Fiona, because remember, instead of giving her like the old magical kiss, which was like a few scenes prior, he actually shook her awake. He's like, "Are you Princess Fiona?" Instead of kissing her, it was like for a brief moment you saw like a bit of a chemistry or like a bit of like romantic plans, which is stereotypically have been shown in fairy tales, where Prince Charming kisses, the princess to wake her up, all that other stuff. But then it didn't happen like that. It was just like, realistically speaking, if somebody's asleep, and she wasn't even really asleep. As a matter of fact, why didn't Dragon eat her? Huh, that's a thing that I would actually love to see. But then it becomes real interesting in that scene that instead of instead of sitting there trying to talk with her or serenade her or trying to call with her and all that stuff, he was just like, I'm just there for business, nothing more, nothing less. Let's go. So to make it much more interesting, when Shrek did that, he broke another fairy tale trope, which is to kiss the princess and live happily ever after. And to make things even more funnier, if you really look at the beginning of the movie, guess what page he tore off? The part that says happily ever after. Like that's ever gonna happen. And he was in the outhouse. Guess what? That basically shows you what fairy tale is. Just nothing more than just shit. Then, just remember that. Then, to make it even more interesting, Shrek, albeit Donkey and Fiona were being carried out, they were running from the dragon, aka a bit of reality that's actually trying to chase them, trying to catch up to them. But Shrek did something that many would consider to be like another breaking of a fairy tale trope. And what was that? Not killing the dragon or dragon. Not killing her. Now, that was interesting because instead of stereotypically trying to slay the dragon just to save the princess and all that other stuff, no. He spared the dragon's life, which is like I mentioned before, another fairy tale trope being broken, but at the same time, another bite in reality. You can't kill off reality. As a matter of fact, realistically speaking, you can't. Realistically speaking, reality cannot be killed. It cannot be run away from. You just gotta deal with it, and that's how Shrek dealt with it by locking it, not away, but just at a good distance. So not to kill it, but to look at it head on and say, "Yup, that's how I cope with it." Then after that scene, Dragon is caught and all that other crap. But then Fiona does something that is typical. She mentions like the typical fairy tale trope of, the princess waiting for the prince. But instead, she gave off like this flare of independence or an attitude, as some people would actually call it. But she was fiercely independent, which I actually loved. Hence why she's one of my favorite female characters in fiction, because she's not like the stereotypical princess that's like defenseless or eat crumpets and all that crap. She's saying, "Hey, look, if this so-called king or this so-called royal wants to save me, why did he send you as opposed to getting here himself?" And so then she says, if Lord Farquaad, this is like an old medieval tale turned into like a comedy joint with original flair. So the names are gonna sound a bit extravagant. So then now, here's the funny thing. When she said that, if Lord Farquaad wants to save me properly, I will wait for him right here. And when she did it, you actually felt like, oh shit, she means business. And then Shrek says, "Hey, I'm no one's messenger boy, all right? I'm a delivery boy." Oh shit. That part showed up like, yo, Shrek's reality was much different than the expectation that Fiona had to deal with. And you had a feeling like Fiona was hiding something right there. But that was pretty important because Shrek and Fiona actually had a bit of a look right there, and they argued. And he picked her up. And he said, "You know what? You're coming with me." He said, "That's right." He says, "You're coming with us." And Donkey, ever so optimistic, looks at reality in this particular way, which I thought was actually pretty cool. You know, he doesn't look at reality in a negative. He looks at the bright side of things. And then this one particular scene solidifies this point of view that Shrek deals with, just a sense of reality versus fantasy, or reality versus expectations, fairy tale versus, the real world. It was the scene where both Donkey and Shrek were just sitting down in the middle of the night talking. So Donkey goes up to Shrek and he said, "Hey, Donkey." He's like, "Hey, Shrek, do you want to talk about something?" And then he saw Shrek, something inside of him. Like, it was funny because in the second movie he mentioned that donkeys are the wisest of, in some cultures, donkeys are the wisest of all creatures, especially as talking ones. Now, even though afterwards you look at Donkey, you just think, like, man, he's such a jackass, no pun intended. But he did something that showed off his wisdom. And what was that? He said something was wrong with Shrek. And he said, "Hey, Shrek, are you hiding something?" And Shrek says, "Never mind, Donkey." And he said, Donkey goes back and retorts and says, "Oh, so it's about one of those onion things, is it?" And Shrek replied back and says, "No, it's about those drop it and leave it alone things." And then Donkey says, "Why don't you want to talk about it?" And Shrek replies back, "Why do you want to talk about it?" And then Donkey goes back and says, "But why are you blocking?" And Shrek, in a defensive but yet denial way, says, "I'm not blocking." And the Donkey goes back and says, "Oh, yes, you are." And then Shrek, in a threatening way, how the way that one scene just shows off how the way some people cope with reality by not either talking about it, by ignoring it, or by falsely accepting something that's not meant to be. Because remember, reality is ever changing. It's not meant to stay the same. And that's the thing. Sometimes one's expectations can be a reality. But here's the thing. What's an expectation onto a man? In this case, an ogre. So now, Shrek says, "Donkey, I'm warning you." And then Donkey says, "And then who you trying to block out, Shrek? Tell me, who you trying to hide, Shrek? Who? Who you mad at? Who?" And Shrek says, "Everyone." And he yells out, "Everyone." And it says, "Okay." And then Donkey goes out and asks Shrek, "Oh, so now we're getting somewhere. Oh, for the love of Pete." And then Donkey asks the wisest question. "Hey, what's your problem, Shrek, huh? Why you got something against the whole world anyway, huh?" Is it Shrek replies back and answered in one of the more key scenes. He says, "It's not the fact that I have a problem with the world. It seems that the world has a problem with me. When I step out, people take one look at me and goes like, 'Ah, hell, run! A big, stupid, ugly ogre.' Sometimes people judge me before they even know me. That's why I'm better off alone." And in that one instance, you look at Shrek, and then Fiona looked at Shrek. It was just like, wow, that was pretty heavy. And then one instance, when you looked at Fiona, she looked kind of different. Is that reality talking or something else? So, when Donkey sat down with Shrek, he told Shrek something that not many people were willing to tell him. Guess what he told him? "Hey, Shrek, when we met, I didn't think of you as a big, stupid, ugly ogre." And Shrek says, "Thank you." See, two clashing ideals, two clashing realities come together and coexist. That was actually pretty beautiful. And then that fairy tale trope, the donkey being like a stubborn, stupid creature, showing off that like, hey, it has a great amount of insight right then and there to notice like a great problem, and then Shrek being like the stereotypical monster because of appearance, as he talked about before, goes back to what fairy tales are typically known for, which is what the ogre, the monster, is just very terrifying, meaning that it doesn't have any type of mindset. It's just a monster. That's just it. Instead of just like sitting down trying to talk with it or trying to understand it. Fairy tales, that's the thing about fairy tales. It's all about expectation, but none of the understanding. But Shrek turns that whole dynamic upside down, where it's just all the understanding, but none of the expectations. Like they just deliberately crush expectations at the beginning of the movie. That's why, the page happily ever after being torn down. Now, going forward, we see Fiona in question. Don't worry, she didn't trade places with anybody. Let's keep this in mind. Fiona, and then you see Monsieur Hood or Robin Hood, a French West Side Story-esque character, trying to say that, no, don't worry, my love. I just came here to save you from this green beast. And I'm looking at this motherfucker like, oh my God, really? And I think that's where my thing with singing started. And then, he starts singing like this West Side Story-esque kind of way. And he's like, I'm gonna take my blade and run it through your eye, take your eyes, don't take your eyes away, boys, because I'm about to stab. And then Fiona kicks his ass, literally. Knocks him to the side. And then we saw Fiona actually fight, like stereotypically shown. Because in fairy tales, princesses are typically shown to be dainty, damsels in distress. Like, they're not equipped for fighting. They're not equipped for anything except for just looking like a prize or a trophy. And then Fiona turned that all around and turned it on his head. Yo, when I saw that, she whipped all those guys' asses and laid them on the ground. Even Shrek was just like, yo, Fiona, that was amazing to do that and to overall show, like destroy the female archetype that's been typically shown in fairy tale. That was pretty eloquent, but a kick-ass scene, no pun intended as well. Pretty much. And when that was shown, the viewers were just like, yo, this princess can seriously kick some ass. Hey, nice. And then you know that this princess was just like, she's not who she appears to be. When she quoted Shrek, sometimes you don't have to judge people before you know them beforehand, before this happened. Then let's flash forward towards the scene where, Shrek and Fiona start to bond. It shows off like in reality, the person that you expect to be your true love is oftentimes the person that you spend the most time with, actually. You may think of them as a friend, or you may think of them as an associate, but if you share like an intimate bond, if you share like some sort of bond that brings you together, it's not like a person that you meet overnight. It's someone that you can understand, you can generally talk to, and you can overall have a good time with. Be it friendship, relationship, companionship, or partnership. Any type of ship requires a crew, and a crew requires trust. And when you have trust, you have a steady ship. Why do you think there are ships in there? But if you don't, well, it's going to be a mutiny and a maroon. So then, let's get on back to what the Fiona and Shrek, whole thing goes on. and you starting to see that Shrek is, breaking out of his shell or breaking out of the onion in case of this point with Shrek. And then he breaks out of it, and you start seeing that, Shrek is not such a bad guy. It's the fact that harsh realities molded him and made him into this way. So had reality been much kinder, much nicer to him, he would be like a stand-up, all-right guy. And that would have been cool. And him and Donkey would have hit it off much quicker. Or Donkey would have been just, speaking of Donkey, he had like a very shitty reality, to be honest. But yet he always looked at the brighter side of things. Some people may say that's escapism, but looking at how the way Donkey tries to confront problems instead of just running away from them, he's actually something that most people wouldn't really do. And that's coping with reality, and that's actually understanding reality through a positive lens. Then, seeing that scene, and then flash forward to when Donkey went out to look for Shrek, but then he stumbles upon his cabin, I think. But it doesn't go in that order. But let's just get down to the nitty gritty. No, he was actually Donkey was trying to look for Fiona, and then Fiona tries to hide herself, and then she falls out from the sky. Donkey was shocked. He was like, "Oh shit, yo, Shrek, a monster, a monster!" And then Donkey. And if Fiona had to say, like, Donkey, don't worry, it's me. It's me. It's Fiona. And then Donkey was just like, wait, what? Princess? Is that you? That goes off to show off how the way sometimes reality can shift so suddenly that the shock can be like, whoa, what? Wow, you really look like that? And then they have like a deep conversation, the same thing with Shrek. But except it was Donkey with Fiona. And that shows like another side of reality, and the fact that Fiona is not dainty, she's fearless, she's courageous, she's independent, and she's overall a relatable type of character that even men and women can relate to. Just like, Shrek can be related to both men and women, and Donkey can be related to both men and women. And Donkey sat down and talked with, Fiona in her ogre form, which has been revealed what's been going on, why she's always been hiding she only comes out in the daytime but hides in the night. He talks with her and he says, hey, look, Fiona, it's up to you, but I do believe you should talk to Shrek about this. And then she goes off and says something that really hits the archetype really well. And that is the archetype of the typical dainty female princess, which is just, I know, princess instead of prince, princess means the female, younger royalty and all that stuff. I'm like, yes, I know. So then she says, I'm a princess, and this is not how I'm supposed to look. Which goes off and talks about the expectations of how a society, even in fairy tale, has like a look for a particular princess, like how the way a princess is supposed to be, like I mentioned before, and a couple of times throughout this video, to be dainty, to be very submissive, to be very obedient, not being independent, not having your own identity essentially. And then she had to come to terms with that. And then she picks the flower, picking a petal. Then afterwards, after talking with Donkey, coming to terms, she picks a petal of a sunflower and she says, tell him not, tell him not. And then the last petal, she said, tell him. And she says it with such a smile. She wanted to show Shrek her ogre form or her ugly form. Quote, ugly. I thought it was lovely, man. The fact that she was willing to, and don't take this as like, some sort of way as saying like some sort of way, other way. This was literally her, coming out and saying like, "Hey, look, this is how I am. This is who I really am." Something that society typically despises, or social standards typically look at as, as aberrant, not normal. So looking at that and then breaking that down, you see that Fiona is like, she's the pressure that society puts on young women, especially, just to doll up, just to look good, not expressing themselves, not being tough, not being independent. Even in today's time, even when women are, being tough and being independent, sometimes some of them feel like their femininity comes into question when they try to do masculine sports. Hey, a bit of word of advice. You know, you are a pretty beautiful woman no matter what you do, as long as you have a beautiful heart, a beautiful spirit, and a beautiful mind. If all those are corrupt, then you're not beautiful, no matter how pretty the face is. And then you see this with Fiona, and her way, her heart, her mind, and her, quite frankly, her body shone, just shined. But then but believe it or not, Shrek overheard, eavesdropping can cause a bit of a confusion and disturbance. But then Shrek overheard, her and Donkey talking. And he was actually crushed. So that made him revert back to his old, usual self, which is pretty much like, wow, I never even thought of it that way. How do we sometimes in fairy tales they teach people how to label people instead of trying to sit down and understand people. So then Shrek goes out of his way to try to make Fiona happy at the expense of his own happiness. Because originally he just only did it just for the swamp. And we haven't really talked about like the main villain, which is Lord Farquaad, who I mentioned here and there. He wanted to go, get Lord Farquaad, and then overall just try to solve the situation the best way he knew how. But let's talk about, Lord Farquaad and his standings in this. See, look, to him, if you really see him, you think like, oh yeah, he's just like this intimidating big asshole, which is kind of ironic on the term big. Because as Shrek would put it, when they came to town, he's overcompensating for something. So then, after that happened, Lord Farquaad, let me just describe him for a brief moment. Lord Farquaad is basically like the personification of expectation. He he wants to live in a world where it's ideally perfect. No monsters, no ogres, no witches, no nothing. Which all those, to me, in essence, represents differences of different people, different cultures, and different standpoints in life. And looking at that, and then looking at how Lord Farquaad wants to get rid of all of that, but yet he himself isn't perfect because he's insecure about something. You want to know what that is? Even though he's a king, he's short like a prince. So, and funny enough, there was actually, in nearly every fairy tale trope, there's a mirror. I forgot to mention that. And there was a magic mirror that mentioned something. He said this. And he said it boldly. He said, well, technically, you're not a king. After, this was like scenes and scenes and scenes before when they obtained the magic mirror. And he goes out and says, magic mirror. And Gingerbread Man just says, don't tell him anything. He tries to scream out, try to tell him, like, don't tell him shit. And then they dump Gingy down the chute. Oh, man, poor Gingy. But then you see something in Lord Farquaad. You saw like a vanity. You saw something inherently evil. You see something that will taint the hearts of men. and women. That's the sad thing because Lord Farquaad, like I mentioned before, represents, a self conscious expectation or like overall just a fantasy that some people are not willing to cope with reality. So they try to take certain things and try to make everybody believe in their way of life is supreme, nothing more and nothing less. And then looking at that, you realize like, wait a minute. And you have to remember, he lives in this big castle. You expect him to be like this big, tall man. He needs help from his bodyguards because he's half their height, literally. So literally, so let me put it like this, and this is going to be a pun intended. He was short-sighted on the whole world. Seriously, he cannot even see the whole world in a great lens. He lived in a world of expectation, hence why his character was actually really short. In the symbolic purposes and for, comedy purposes as well. To overhype the main villain and to make him look like just like a small problem. But sometimes that small problem can encapsulate a lot of people, hence why he has a kingdom full of expectations. Hence why when you saw the kingdom, initially it was empty, everybody was in the arena to try to find one gallant person to try to save this princess. And I'm talking about scenes before and how the way Lord Farquaad fits into the whole dynamic of expectations versus reality. And Shrek and how the way Shrek turns that whole thing and that whole dynamic upside down. And then looking at Lord Farquaad, and then looking at, basically Fiona, Shrek, Donkey, and how the way some of them cope with the reality in different ways. Lord Farquaad just dashes that out. He doesn't deal with reality. In fact, he dismisses reality. Hence why he's willing to lock away any fairy tale creature so they can look, so this land that he occupies looks spotless, quote unquote, so it can look good in front of other people, as opposed to instead of just accepting it for itself. Basically, the land represents different people or reality. Lord Farquaad represents an expectation or a fairy tale that he so eloquently expresses to the highest degree. It's okay to have like a bit of a heart of a child, but when that heart turns into something evil, when it turns into something insidious to the point that it's willing to harm the lives of many people, then it's not meant to be. You should just let it go. But they say, wherever there's evil, there's good. Wherever there's darkness, there's light. Wherever there's, overall a negative, there's a positive. Lord Farquaad's negative was like an encompassing against three positives, which is Donkey, Shrek, and Fiona. And then going back to looking at Fiona's case, she transformed into the daytime and didn't know how the way the daytime has been typically shown to be, the truth, comfort, and overall just positivity, while the night has been shown to be like mystery, darkness, and unsettling. Like how Fiona's overform and her human form are typically shown to be in that dynamic, but but yet she stayed the same because not only she's independent, but she has a beautiful heart and she has a great mind, which I thought was actually beautiful. Shrek in his rage tries to go to Fiona and just overall tries to make her happy, supposedly by by giving her what she wanted, and then he storms off. But yeah, but the thing is, Shrek also represents the heart of a man. Heart of a man. Man, we're supposed to be strong. We're supposed to be brittle. We're not supposed to be brittle. We're supposed to be buff. We're not.
Not supposed to show any weaknesses or any tears. But at that instance, you could sense like Shrek was hurt. He was hurting real bad. And it goes back to what Donkey once said when they were having their conversation. And he was talking about, the wall. How the way Shrek wanted to build a wall around his swamp so he could overall be happy by himself. And Donkey said this. He said, "You cut me deep, Shrek. You cut me real deep just now. And you know what I think? That this whole wall thing is meant to keep everybody out." And Shrek says, "No, you think?" Now, that whole conversation that I mentioned like a few minutes back, that is going to be very important because that was like the message of the movie. You don't need to block out you don't need to use your expectations to block out reality. And then looking at that and how the way, if you saw this whole montage of how the way Shrek was looking at a broken mirror that was broken because he brushed his teeth, he smiled at the mirror and then the mirror shattered. That same mirror that you saw in the beginning that was shattered because, supposedly Shrek's hideousness just broke, actually appeared right there, and you saw Shrek, instead of smiling, you saw him really sad. You could actually sense it, and then Fiona felt the same way too, even though she went back. Her heart, like they both loved each other because they spent time with each other. They didn't just meet off of like Tinder or some shit like that. They met. They actually bonded. And then Donkey, who represents like the positive side of reality, meets with Dragon, who represents, just reality in essence. And instead of, he was kind of shocked, but yet he saw her, instead of just running away, he was like, "Whoa, you look kind of sad, what's wrong?" And surprisingly, she broke free, which represents a reality in essence. Reality cannot be changed. You can lock it away, you can do all that, but it will eventually be free, just like the truth. The truth will set you free. And then Donkey goes to try to help Shrek, quote unquote, build the wall. And then Shrek says, "You're supposed to build the wall around the swamp, not through it." And Donkey says, "Yes, Shrek, that's your half, this is my half." He said, "Oh, your half, yes, my half. That means I did half the work, I get half the booty." And he said, "Now give me that big ass rock right over there that's as big as your head." And then both Shrek and Donkey butt heads. Well, there was a stick in the middle. No dip joke intended. But if you really saw that, it shows you that how close pessimism and optimism can actually clash with each other, to the point that it seems as if like they're no different. With, like I mentioned before, Shrek represents the negative side or the pessimistic side of reality, while Donkey represents the positive or the optimistic side of reality. And they both clash out, they both mad at each other, but then you see them. But outside the altercation, Shrek said, see, Donkey says to Shrek, now, no, it's always been me, me, me. Now, guess what? Now it's my turn. So you just shut up and pay attention. You've been mean to me, and you've been trying to know my feelings ever since." And then Shrek goes off and asks this question that many people don't even get, but yet they still ask it because their heart asks them to. They say, "Oh yeah, if I treated you so bad, why did you come back?" And Donkey gave off like this great ass answer. He said, "That's what friends do. They forgive each other." And when I heard that line, that was just like, wow. So instead of just walking away, leaving the supposed villain, being left alone, and then the stupid Donkey has shown to be like one of the wisest characters right then and there. Albeit he has a mouth, but he's one of the wisest characters. And then Shrek and his herd says, "All right, donkey, I forgive you for stabbing me in the back." He's like, "Oh!" And then this is where the proverbial onion comes back. He says, then Donkey says, "Oh, you're so caught up in your last, onion boy. You're afraid to admit your own feelings." He's like, "What do you mean I don't have feelings? Fiona said she liked you, maybe even loved you." And then there goes Donkey right there. And then Shrek says, "Love me? She said I was ugly, just a hideous creature." And then Donkey says, "Shrek, she wasn't talking about you, she was talking about somebody else." And Shrek comes out of his layers, out of his proverbial onion, and then just says, "Yo, what do you mean? She wasn't talking about me?" I'm like, "Yes, Shrek, she wasn't talking about you, she was talking about somebody else." And at that one moment, you saw like how pessimism and optimism can actually come together and have a proper conversation. Shrek literally, he didn't break down again on his knees and say, "I'm sorry." He just said, "Donkey, I'm sorry, all right?" And instead of having Donkey, getting mad and saying, "Yeah, but don't let it happen again," he was like, "All right, man." But then you see something very great. But then they wanted to stop. See, look, Shrek wanted to stop Fiona. That was something in his heart, that what he wanted to do, what was right. Then you saw something very great. Donkey was very optimistic. He said, "Wherever there's a will, there's a way, and I have a way." And he whistled up to the sky. His girlfriend, the dragon, came down. How do we? But that also shows off a bit of a good dynamic as well. How do we? Negative and positive realities can come together to form like a great reality, and that great reality can overcome expectations. Now at the wedding, you see like this, to me, like a very big clash of expectations versus reality. And then, but beforehand, I want to talk about something. Donkey mentioned about a cake, and then we saw a cake. When Fiona's wedding was about to go down, with Lord Farquaad. And then on the cake, you saw that the cake, it was white, symbolized the holy, purity, and all that other stuff. But on the cake, you saw Lord Farquaad standing a little bit taller than Fiona, which is like the expectation of like, a king is supposed to have a little bit more power than the queen. But other than that, it doesn't show off a reality. Like I mentioned before, a cake is just like a dolled up piece of dough. That's just it. So Fiona does something that was actually that was actually somewhat symbolic. She pushes Lord Farquaad's, statue down to represent his actual height, which is like, even if expectation is there, reality will still be there. And then you see that matter of fact, in Lord Farquaad's game, he has like this guy, this masked tormentor. His name is Thelonious. And it's kind of funny because Thelonious represents how expectations can actually intimidate people into not talking to other people. And I thought, like, wow, Thelonious, if you really know Thelonious' character, he's actually not a bad guy, but he just does what he's told. So sometimes intimidation and expectation, they don't really cope well. And then you see this. You see how the way Thelonious is like, he's this very intimidating character. And you see how the way he's also like another form of expectation, like an intimidating form, and how the way expectation is meant to be more of a iron grip. But in actuality, he's not like that. You already know how this goes. And then Shrek comes in, tries to tell Fiona the truth. Actually, attempts to tell Fiona the truth. He says, Fiona, Lord Farquaad does not love you. And she says, why you say that? It's because he only wants to marry you so he can be king. And right then and there, the ultimate act of love right there in reality is telling it how it is, just telling the truth. And then Lord Farquaad laughs and try to make it all look like some sort of joke, try to say like, "Oh, the ogre loves the princess." And then had Thelonious not been there, the people would just been silent, like confused. That's the audience. If you notice, represents how crowded people typically think. They just think what the leader said. They just typically think what the leader says. They don't think for themselves. And then you see that. And you're just like, wow. And then Thelonious just puts up a sign that says, laugh. Then you see the ultimate act of how the way fairy tale tropes and expectation gets shattered right then and there in the first movie. We got other two movies to deal with, so there you go. By Fiona actually revealing the truth in front of everybody that in the daytime she's a human, but at night she's an ogre. And then Lord Farquaad and all of his expectations, guess what he does? He disregards her beauty, disregards what she's been through, and just looks at her and says, "Oh, that's disgusting. Guards, guards," and then tries to send the guards to kill her and all that other stuff and try to kill Shrek. Shrek fights back, even though pessimism is a bitch. But when you actually sit down and talk with people who are pessimistic, you realize that they have many problems just like us. And it takes just to open up to somebody, just to overall, you know, give them some help. And then when that happened, Lord Farquaad, who's the personification of expectation or fairy tales, tries to kill Fiona, and then reality comes in, who is the dragon, like I mentioned before, gulps up expectations in a symbolic end. And then after that, Shrek and Fiona got married on the grounds of reality, not expectations. And the whole fairy tale trope was utterly shattered in the first movie. And it showed up like, yo, oh shit. So it's not about how a person looks or how they present their facade. It's overall how they are as a person, their overall character. It goes back to Dr. King. I want to live in a nation where I would not have my children to be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Lord Farquaad basically was the reverse of that. He judged people by the color of their skin. No, he basically judged by the color of their skin, but not the content of their character. Shrek, Donkey, and Fiona represented that. I'm not trying to say that they represent Dr. King's dream, don't get me wrong. But they overall represent a reality that, hey, just because somebody looks nice, they have like a nice home, they have, they're around nice people, that doesn't necessarily mean they have a nice life. That all could just be a facade. And if Fiona had fell for the facade, she would have been tortured. And that would have been like a very sad ending. And I'm great that it ended on like a great but yet a realistic note, even though it uses, fairy tale creatures like a talking donkey, a dragon, an ogre, a princess, and a so-called noble king, even though he was very short-sighted. But then you catch it. You start to see how much, Shrek is just like this overall influence. And that's part one of my analysis on the Shrek series. I'm not counting the fourth one, I'm doing the main three because all three of them deal with a bit of the same thing. The core theme is just reality versus expectations, or fairy tale versus, real life. In real life, nothing's ever certain. The person that you love is oftentimes the person that you hang around with, and oftentimes the person that you understand, that understands you the most, and you understand them back. But all it comes right down to is acceptance, and that's the main thing. And like Donkey says, don't get caught up in your layers. I love you guys, man. Later.